The community property problem from February of 1993 is another enormously instructive fact pattern. It's also a very standard community property question. There are 5 items of property, so it's a racehorse. A couple of the items are somewhat unconventional if your only experience in this subject is doing the other questions that you can work on in this seminar. So we'll have a look and we'll freshen up a couple of issues that are commonly tested but which have not yet been covered in this seminar. Let's just start by looking at the call of the question. We are asked what are their respective rights in 1. The savings account, 2. The house, 3. Harry's disability benefits, 4. Social Security, retirement benefits, and Harry's company pension. Discuss. Well, it's obvious this is a community property question, and we also know that we will break down our analysis into source, actions, and we will apply the presumptions to reach a conclusion. So, this is a fact pattern that can be organized for our analysis almost as fast as we can scribble out the words. It doesn't take any great thinking to organize a good response to this answer. But let's pause for a moment and consider a couple of the calls of the question. We know about the savings account, the house pretty much. Those are issues we've seen before. But disability benefits is a somewhat different story. We haven't seen those before, and basically the way it works is disability benefits are considered a replacement for income. The community gets a pro rata interest based on the extent to which the community has paid in. That's the black letter rule. We'll see how it applies in this context. Social Security, mentioned in call of the question number 4, is different. This is a federal law, and the federal law will trump any state community property laws. And then the company pension, this is an issue that is commonly tested, and we'll see how it works in just a matter of moments. So a 5-part call. We've got 1 hour to answer the question. That means we've got maybe 12 or 13 minutes a call, and we've got to be quick. So go to the top of the question, and we see that Harry and Wanda are lifetime California residents, married in 82, and enjoyed a good marriage until 89, when Harry was run over by a truck. So we've got grave injuries suffered by Harry. He no longer can work, and he gets $200,000 in personal injury settlement proceeds in 1991. And we've seen personal injury proceeds before, and we know that if the injury and the settlement are obtained during marriage, it's technically a community asset. But we will give this asset to the injured spouse unless the interests of justice dictate otherwise. So he gets this $200,000 PI settlement, puts it into an existing savings account held in his name only. Well, we already know that the mere fact that somebody takes title by themselves does not serve to transmute the essential nature of the asset. We also find out more about other deposits, which gives rise to the issue of tracing. So we consider the bequest from father, the bequest to separate property, and winnings from a 1985 game show appearance. Well, interestingly, an appearance on a game show during marriage qualifies as work, and consequently, those game show winnings will be considered a community asset. No other deposits or withdrawals equals no problem with doing a tracing analysis. In paragraph 2, we see Harry and Wanda living on the disability payments and Wanda's earnings as a waitress. Those waitress earnings, clearly community property. From this income, they have made monthly mortgage payments on the house Harry bought in his name alone several years before their marriage. All right, so we've got a house that is of a somewhat different wrinkle than we've seen before, and the analysis will flow from those facts. In paragraph 3, we find that Harry will be 65 in 1996 when he will be eligible to collect a company pension in lieu of disability benefits and Social Security. Wanda also will be 65 in 1996, and she has no pension from her waitress job. So, in 1992 in December, Harry and Wanda permanently separated, and Wanda filed for divorce. Or, as we say now, in a more antiseptic era, Wanda commenced dissolution proceedings. and then we get the call of the question. All right, that's pretty straightforward and simple. Take a look at the framework of my analysis in the outline of issues that I present. Once again, I follow the format. This is the easiest subject on the exam because it's the easiest to organize. We don't need to do a lot of thinking to set this up. We just have to be good clerks and good secretaries finding a home for the facts and the details. Okay, so with regard to the savings account, the source is separate property opened with a separate bequest in 84, then commingling with 85 community game show winnings and the personal injury award. The bottom line is we'll trace all these different assets and allocate them appropriately. Next, we turn to the house. The original source of the house also was separate property, but the mortgage has been paid by community funds throughout the marriage, and thus the community will develop a pro rata interest in the value of this property. Pretty simple and straightforward. We don't even have to do a whole lot of math. Next, we turn to the disability payments. These are being paid in lieu of a salary. The only relevant action is the separation, and the quick bottom line is all of these disability payments are community funds until the date of the separation. At that point, they become the separate property of Harry. Next, we turn to the Social Security issue, a novel issue that we have yet to see in this seminar, and one that has been tested more than once in the last 20 or so years on the California bar. The source of this money is the federal government. The actions are preemption by the federal Social Security statute over California's community property system. The bottom line, Harry keeps the Social Security as his own separate property. Next, we consider the company pension. Again, it's paid by the company, presumably based on the time of service. And so, again, the community would develop a pro rata interest in this pension based on the time in service. So, a pro rata share. Pretty simple stuff. But what makes this difficult, other than a couple of black letter law issues that perhaps you haven't reviewed before this seminar, particularly if that's how you're learning community property law, it's pretty straightforward, easy to organize, and as usual, you'll see that my answer is thick with factual analysis. Look at the very first thing I write in the answer. I indicate that this is a California marriage. I talk about the dates. I indicate that California's community property system is going to govern the distribution of this estate. So, once again, in 3 short sentences, I cover all of the ground that a page or 2 pages of bar review boilerplate can cover. Don't be foolish. Realize that you are going to get credit for your analysis, not your ability to bark out material you have memorized. Next, we turn to the actual analysis of this fact pattern, and we start with the savings account. The source is pretty straightforward. It's a separate property source, and thus this account starts out its life as separate property. But then we have commingling. The game show winnings are deposited, and the personal injury award is deposited. You'll see in my conclusion, I actually spend more time in this paragraph than in the earlier paragraphs in this section. The bottom line is that the respective interests are going to be traced, and we will award to Harry the personal injury award, not because it is his separate property, but because it is likely in the interests of justice to do so. And I allocate the other elements of that account accordingly. We move on to consider the house. Here again, it starts off as a separate property asset. But the actions are significant. During the marriage, mortgage payments are made with community earnings, mostly from Wanda's waitress job and the rest from Henry's disability payments. One assumes that before his injury, the husband contributed earnings money to those payments also. And these would be community property monies. So in the conclusion, we get into some black letter law. We've got the Moore case coming up here, and if you didn't know about it before, you'll learn about it here. We've got community funds being used to pay the mortgage on property that is held in the name of one spouse. So, pursuant to Moore, the community will develop a pro rata interest. The house will remain the property of husband, but the community is entitled to a pro rata share based on the amount paid by community funds. They don't give us those figures, so we are spared having to even set up the math formula with real numbers. So next we turn to the disability payments, and the source is Harry's employer, and these payments are being made in lieu of salary. And so they would have the same characterization for community property purposes as salary. Therefore, these disability payments are a community asset up until December of 1992, when this couple chose to separate. At that point, it becomes the separate property of the husband. Next, we turn to an issue that may be novel for at least some of you. Here's where you'll learn the details about Social Security and how it trumps California's local community property laws. We know that Social Security payments are paid directly to the beneficiary from Social Security and the federal government in Washington, D.C. The action is pretty central here. The federal government laws control, the state laws take a back seat. Maybe more accurately, they're kicked out of the bar altogether. So, by federal mandate, Harry will keep the Social Security retirement payments regardless of how the local state would treat those benefits. And any other result would undermine the administrative integrity and functions of Social Security. Finally, we consider the company pension. He gets to collect a company pension in lieu of disability and Social Security in 1996. The pension is going to be paid by the company based on the amount of time Harry spent in service, we assume. The actions include the marriage, and that means the community gets a share of Harry's pension based on a pro rata interest. Now, look at the conclusion. You'll see how after 1996, I don't allow Harry to relax into the Social Security presumption. I basically force him to take this pension in lieu of Social Security and to split it with his spouse because it is fair and because it's probably necessary to keep Wanda out of poverty. She doesn't have a pension. She's about to turn 65 also, and it would be unfair to allow the husband to use the Social Security system as a way to extract vengeance on his spouse. They're going to have to act like grown-ups, even if they don't get to act like a married couple. The bottom line is, Harry will have to take this pension, and it will be divided based on a pro rata interest that the community developed based on the pro rata time that you spent in service. So that wraps up a consideration of another racehorse community property question. More of these questions are racehorse questions than not, and this question, fortunately, had a couple of novel issues.